we're not just defending against code now. We're defending against any untrusted text that will somehow sneak into the context window. And I started to see some of these reports and examples of how easy it is to make your LLM do rogue, crazy stuff. One line commit on some instruction file marked down in a Git repo somewhere, and suddenly the LLM is now trying to delete databases, right?
Yeah.
Because you convinced it to.
So I saw a joke about that. I was like, oh, now we have SQL injection as like a required service for development, right?
Welcome to the Agentic DevOps podcast, and I'm your host, Brett Fisher. I'm joined in this episode by my fantastic co-host, Nirmal Mehta of AWS, and our very special guest, there should be a drum roll here, Solomon Hykes of Dagger. Well, we didn't need the drum roll. We've had Solomon on the show before, but this is a special one. I think it's pretty special for three reasons. One, Solomon being the co-founder of .cloud, then the co-founder of Docker, and then the co-founder of Dagger, gives him a unique perspective and clarity of thought about what's happening on the ground with AI and AI agents in software engineering. Two, we deep dive into many different topics around the intersection of AI, software development, CI/CD, the new model context protocol, AI in containers, and the act of letting autonomous, non-deterministic, crazy texting robots into our infrastructure in CI. And three, lastly, because Solomon's the one who reached out to me in early 2025 and helped me see the shift that was happening with the invention of Agentic AI and was one of the inspirations for starting this second podcast focused just on how AI would be automating our DevOps soon. I will tell you, this episode is free from hype because Solomon is known for being thoughtful and someone who avoids hyperbole, and we need that right now when talking about AI and agents. Honestly, I enjoyed this conversation and Solomon's insights so much, I'm probably going to listen to it again myself because it was a long one, but it was packed, I felt like, with good insights and conversations. So please enjoy this chat with Solomon Hykes of Dagger. Solomon, hi.
Hello. I'm the co-founder of a startup called Dagger, Dagger.io. And before that, I was the co-founder of Docker. And that's a total of 15 years of my life, 10 years at Docker, 5 years at Dagger. So that's me in a nutshell. A lot of developer tools, a lot of containers, a lot of open source. Yeah, I'm just excited, grateful that I still get to build things and people care enough to use it and complain to me about the bugs. That's all a builder can ask for, really.
Hi, I'm Nirmal Mehta. I'm a principal specialist solution architect at AWS, a Docker captain, and really good friends with Bret. And today, I'm not an AI. On top of that, opinions expressed are solely my own and do not express the views or opinions of my employers.
You are doing a bunch of new stuff at Dagger.
Yes.
And you just did a keynote. This was at AI Engineers World Fair. Is that the right name?
Exactly.
Tell me about the event and what you talked about.
So Dagger's a traditionally DevOps-focused company. We didn't start as an AI company, but our community started applying our tech to AI use cases. So we got really interested and decided to invest in that use case alongside traditional platform engineering use cases. And we've been figuring that out. And this conference was our first major launch on the AI side. So we launched at this conference a new open source project called Container Use that mirrors computer use, browser use, which are common terms in this new AI agent world, right? Computer use is when you give a computer for the agent to use. Browser use, you give it a browser. Container use, you give it a bunch of containers to use specifically for coding. So these are coding agents, Cursor, Windsurf, Claude Codes, Codex, etc. The AI literally writes the code for you. It's developing for you. But generating the code now is the easy part because the models are so smart. The hard part is everything else, building it, testing it, running it in an environment that can actually support it, and then doing that in a loop rapid enough that you can get work done. And right now, all these agents have the same problem. They're operating on your computer, basically. And so you can only really run one of them at a time, because otherwise they're going to wreck your environment. So container use solves that. You just plug it into your favorite agent, and then you can run a bunch of parallel tasks, and each instance of the agent gets its own containerized environment. So that's what we launched. And it's all powered by the Dagger platform, which is much more comprehensive, but also much more complex. So different audience, different layers of the stack, right? Dagger is more for platform engineers, like to build a whole system for their developers. Container use is something you just drop in. It's an MCP server. It's for developers who want to use these tools to get things done.
So if it's running as an MCP server and you're in an IDE, right? So the developers in their own IDE.
Yep.
And they run MCP, the MCP container use server, right? That agent that the container use spins up as a container, I'm imagining, where do the MCP servers that you want that agent to use, where are those sitting? Are those sitting inside that container, or are you specifying?
Yeah.
If you're running, because it's kind of getting turtles.
Yeah.
Turtles and turtles, right? So like turtles all the way down, if anyone catches that reference. But where are the things sitting?
It depends on how you integrate it, and it depends on how you use your agent. But the main way you integrate today is with as an MCP server running alongside your agent. And it's the agent that's the agent as in the application, right? So Cursor, Claude Code. You configure that agent app, let's call it, like the host, to run the MCP server.
Right.
And then it connects to it and it decides when or how to use it. And so in that configuration, the agent itself is not running in a container. It's just running wherever you decide to run it. But it has access to new tools in the MCP, LLM tool call sense. So the LLM that is driven by this agent can now decide to call container use tools to do things like enter an environment, edit files in the environment, run a command in the environment, document what's going on in the environment. So it's like the equivalent of dev container, or one of those containerized dev environment products, except it's not for humans, it's for AIs to use.
Gotcha. Okay.
But the key, to answer your question, that's one way to integrate over MCP. And the key is that the trade-off is that when you integrate over MCP, it's optional because we don't control the agent. We can't isolate the agent itself. So we give it the option to do things in this isolated environment. So you need to prompt it to use it because it could still decide not to. Because the other tools that are built in to the regular agent are still there. But with a little bit of prompting, it works very well. The other way to integrate that we're also experimenting with is more niche, but much more powerful, I think. If you're using one of those command line agents, Claude Code, Codex CLI, right? Those are not as popular in the mainstream as these all-in-one IDEs, but they are very, very sharp tools that there's a whole community of developers, of engineers leveraging to great effect, especially Claude Code, but there are others competing with it. And what's interesting about that is a CLI you can wrap and run inside a container, right?
Right.
So that's a really interesting approach that we're experimenting with, also with
But
containers.
that wouldn't be but if you're wrapping, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the same environment each time.
Well, the wrapping is just a way to inject any environment. Then you still need a way to produce the environment and make it repeatable and snapshot it and all of that. Luckily, we have a whole system layer that is really good at that, and it's Dagger, right? So we have all the primitives to orchestrate any kind of building and running and interconnecting of these containerized environments, right? So that part is the easy part for us. Well, the missing part is how do you integrate that into an agentic workflow, right? So MCP is the obvious place to start, and it's the only way you can use this today, right? If you go to the container use repo today, it's going to say, this is an MCP server, here's how you install it. But since we're going deep, I find it really interesting that there are other ways to integrate it, including wrapping the whole CLI. So if you're using Claude Code, you could open 10 terminals and then you run a Cloud Code instance in each terminal, and each of those is running its own sandbox, basically.
Yeah. What I'm gathering from this conversation already is that we're so early and it's moving so fast. It's even hard to find the right words to describe these
Yes.
components.
Yeah, but
and communicate what we're
Yeah.
pattern. But I think I understand. Like, for example, I've been using Klein a lot in VS Code, and I'm finding myself having to remind my agent, in your parlance, to keep using the Docker containers that it has set up in the past for the application that I'm having it build.
Yeah.
Like, it keeps forgetting that it's like a containerized application.
Yeah.
And I have to it'll try to run like some kind of test command, maybe in Node or in Python.
Yeah.
And I have to stop it and say, hey, remember, you created a container, run it whenever. And so it sounds like that first integration point is like an easier way with some prompting for me to consistently get my agent to use containers properly.
And
as
also,
a development environment.
It's very little prompting because it's just, hey, use those tools. What we're doing with container use is we're taking an existing set of best practices that are being pioneered by, let's say, the bleeding edge of engineers really using these coding agents aggressively, and they're pushing towards async work, right? They're pushing to make the transition from one agent that I'm babysitting, basically. Like it's in the IDE and it's going to say, hey, I'm going to call this tool now. Is that okay? Yes. And you have to kind of watch it the whole way because it's messing with your local files and your local system. You know, if it runs a command, it's on your laptop. So if it edits a file, it's on your Git checkout. So what these power users are doing is they're gluing together custom scripts and custom tools to do something more advanced, by isolating the agent in an environment so that it doesn't wreck the whole system, and they can run more than one in parallel. That's the dream. Like, oh yeah, I've got 10 issues open. Let me run 10 of these and let monitor them. And the dilemma right now is if you're babysitting one at a time, because it's not sandbox, you can't do that. But if you go and buy, subscribe to one of those cloud agents, OpenAI has Codex now. Confusingly, there's Codex, the managed agent, which is not Codex, the CLI, two different things. But, Devin and a million
Amazon
competitors.
Q, Amazon Q.
Basically, a fully cloud-hosted, fully black box agent where you basically say, hey, please do this, like usually solve this issue, and then you wait for a pull request. And then usually they have a GitHub integration so that you can review the code, leave comments on GitHub, and then you wait, and then it's coming back and it's gonna say, oh, okay, I fixed it this way, that way. The problem with that is it's black box, so you can't run it locally, you can't run it on your favorite compute provider. It's like a old school PaaS, right? All in one. Sometimes they even have their own secrets manager built in, so you have to go and copy secrets in there. It's very all in one. And also, sometimes the agent messes up in a way that you can't recover from just with a code review. You're like, give me the keyboard. Let me fix this real quick. And so you can't do that with those very long loop agents. So these power users, they've been cobbling together an in-between where it's sandboxed, but it can run locally or wherever, and they can just get in there. And the way they do that is with Git work trees for the file edits. So they'll run 10 instances of their agent, and each instance gets what's called a Git work tree, which is like a sort of a Git level virtualization. And then they'll cobble something together with Docker or something, for execution. Yeah. So you have roughly isolated execution for building and testing and whatever. Roughly isolated file edits with Git work trees, and then a bunch of scripts. And then you'll find blog posts, here's how I did my setup. We're at that stage. And what we're doing is taking that and packaging it in a streamlined tool that does that for you. You install it, it's an MCP server, and boom, you have that kind of all in one, but done cleanly.
Right. Yeah, because what you're just describing, that power, it's like almost like we're not learning the lessons or reusing the patterns, because that just sounds like a typical CI/CD process where we're orchestrating multiple build environments that are automating, like that they're standing up an environment, pulling in the Git
Yeah.
work
Well,
tree, building a container or whatever it
Yes,
is,
but
and then
that's exactly what it
destroying
is.
itself.
That's
Right.
exactly what it is. But to be
like modern
fair, the current
Yeah.
state of CI/CD in most software stacks is not great, not repeatable. That's the problem we've been trying to solve for a while with Dagger. Right. And
Right.
so in a way, it's the dev loop that's local and very rapid, and the CI/CD loop that is longer and more heavyweight, right? They're kind of converging, they're kind of merging, right? But that the tooling is not ready for that. That's why, I mean, that's sort of why Dagger exists. We started by making CI repeatable and portable and lightweight enough that you can lift it and run it even on the local machine right next to your dev loop. So now CI sits right next to dev, and that our community has been sort of pushing to converge the two, and now agents are the forcing function for making that happen everywhere. Because the biggest objection to Dagger is not that's a bad idea or that would not help me. It's usually, oh, that would be nice, I'll do it, but we can live another year with a shitty CI/CD stack, basically. Like, it's fine, it's good enough. Sure, the platform team is ripping their hair out, but like, they'll live. Developers can always like figure something out. They're used to it. But with agents, literally, if they don't have this repeatable environment to build tests, they can't function. You're stuck with just one. So it's a huge blocker. Like, you can't postpone this. If you postpone it, literally you will not have an army of agents helping your developers while your competition does. Yeah. So you got to retool. Everyone's going to have to retool. And so we're in here providing tools. That's our motivation, I guess.
So that's super interesting. So the agent, this new agentic way of working is essentially forcing organizations to get their CI/CD story.
Yeah, CI/CD as we know it is going to disappear. Basically, it's going to disappear because it was already slowing down human developers, and now agents they develop 100 times faster than humans, and so it's slowing them 100 times more, basically.
Right, and the testing and the guardrails are become more important for those environments.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The integration testing of
yeah, with humans, you can always fall back to, okay, well, I guess it's not optimal if I have to do it again by hand on my computer, but, I have eyes and hands and the brain, and I can go and do it, but like, the agent gets the environment you give it. There's no fallback, So if the environment doesn't support building repeatably, the agent's not going to get a way to build at all. It's just going to it's going to run random shell commands, and it's going to wreck the place. So it's a must now. This must be solved. And let me tell you, this makes me very happy because we've been building the tech to solve it for several years now.
Right.
And it just went from a nice to have that, steered us towards the largest, more sophisticated engineering organizations. Like, the typical Dagger production user is a larger, more sophisticated platform team. This is going to affect everyone.
So when I step back, and Nirmal and I aren't building a startup around AI, but the amount of conversations we've had in the last 3 months, I thought 2024 was like peak AI conversations, and now
we haven't even started.
Yeah, I've had 10 conversations this week, and it feels like I needed to have 20. But when I think about the work you were describing here, a lot of these conversations where we're talking about the sort of how agents and MCP has redefined how we utilize AI as developers. I'm counting like 4 topics. We have humans, we have an LLM, we have an agent, and then we have the tools, the MCP protocol that we access tools. And all these different, whether we're talking about IDEs or we're talking about Dagger or we're talking about Devin, or, regardless of its level of agenticness, it feels like those are all the 4 things. There's these 4 objects or topics, or it's a Venn diagram where they all come together. It's just a question of what is your LLM and what is your agent. And I don't think of my IDEs as agents, but now that you're saying it that way, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that makes it's a perfect analogy for me. It makes sense that my VS Code, or I'm trying to use some of the NeoVim plugin AI editors, and they're all right, but I feel like they're 6 months or a year behind in terms of automating everything. I probably should just go like what you're saying. I should probably go just pure GUI-less command line tools that just spit out work that's done as files, and then I look at them in an editor of my choice.
I find that very attractive. Yeah, but I think both will coexist. I don't think in IDE agents will go away. I just think coding agents are spreading right now beyond the confines of the IDE to be embedded everywhere and across the whole life cycle.
When you were saying the two different integration patterns, I see those just merging at some point. Like you're going to be doing both of those, right?
Totally.
You still have like initial planning phases, like setting up your project management kind of agents, your architecture, documentation, all those other activities that are, I think, probably more suitable for that first integration. And then also having a agent of agents, MCP, that is like what you're handing over control to manage like all these other, the second integration pattern, essentially.
Yeah.
And I agree, Bret. I think those are like 4 areas of concern, but there's a lot of similarity and overlap of DevOps. So to me, it's almost like if you want to think of DevOps as industrial revolution of IT in a sense, I think agentic architectures are a paradigm shift of DevOps, right? Like as we were saying, CI/CD is going to change completely. Automation needs to reliability, scalability, and automation of environments, and your integration testing frameworks and things like that are a must now in this new paradigm. And so this is a revolution in the DevOps space, essentially, that we're witnessing in real time.
And the reason I called out those specific things, those 4 things, is because my presumption is that the audience of this podcast aren't all at the level of doing this that we are. Like maybe some of them are ahead of us, and they're bleeding edge, but some of them, they're tinkering around with AI helping them code gen in an editor, but they're not necessarily thinking about manually adding MCP tools to their IDE yet, and they're not going maybe full agent mode in their editors, as we have like a little toggle right now, and they're maybe not doing the IDE-less automation like Claude Desktop and some of the other tools that you just basically give it a text prompt and you walk away, and then sometime later, their files are edited. But when I think about all the different components that we've been talking about and explaining and breaking down, it's like you've got to have a human in the loop. I think I want to stress that because there's a lot of hype that implies that like we're not in the loop, and the human is still committing the code to me. Like the boss still needs someone to fire when the code works incorrectly in production, and so I still have to approve it. They can't fire the AI, so I'm still there. I've got a robot editing it for me, and I'm maybe choosing a model. I've been having fun with Sonnet 4 this week, and it's the best experience I've had with an LLM yet, and it is still nowhere near 100% correct, but it is greater than 50, I think, at this point. And this new world of tools, and so container use being a tool, I was going to ask, do you think Nirmal was talking about fighting to get the LLM to commit to using the tool? And I've had this very similar experience lately where I've ended up with too many MCP tools connected to my agent, and it gets confused about which one to use because they some of them have similar tooling in them, I have a curl inside of a Chrome
I have thoughts on that
tool, and then I have curl as a dedicated tool, but that particular curl, it only can call a single curl. So if I ask it to ping something 100 times or to test a response rate 100 times, it literally calls the tool 100 times manually, and it takes me, and it's in serial, so it's very slow. It feels like the minute I play with something, I find the limits and the problems.
Yeah, I think,
and it all feels very new.
MCP is very misunderstood. Also, it's happening so fast. Like, just you got to sit and take a minute to even think to form an opinion. But like right now, you know how I'll draw a parallel between the explosion and hype around MCP and the explosion and hype around containers. Okay. So
Okay.
containers blew up when Docker blew up. And then it was sort of this twin. It was both exciting to developers and exciting to infrastructure people, right? For different reasons. But there was a period of time where it was very developer driven, right? And then around the time where Docker kind of slowed down and, stopped pushing on innovation so much, the Kubernetes community sort of took over, and then it became much more infrastructure focused, right? So there was a transition from this is how developers can now move much faster and to some degree escape the vigilance of IT. Early on, for example, a very common pattern was people would give early demos of Docker super early. And these usually, the lead developer or, the most DevOps savvy person on the app side, they would get it. They're like, oh, this solves a problem I have with IT, because IT is locking everything down. They're gatekeepers to me. If I need
IT cartel.
Yeah.
IT
If I
cartel.
need even like a dev instance, a staging instance, virtualization is supposed to make that easy, but IT controls the access to the VM. So I have to fill an actual triplicate form. This is something that someone told me.
Yep.
To get access to a VM. And I need to explain in detail which system packages I need installed. So they're micromanaging libraries, application servers, the whole thing. And then I get my VM, and then if I need another one, I need to do it again. So now I'm going to say I need 10 VMs maxed out. It's a very important application. It's called Docker. Just install Docker, just that one package. And IT doesn't know what Docker is. They don't know what containers are.
Right.
And so it creates this buffer, this area of freedom where devs can actually get things done until, later, gradually, IT catches up and is like, oh, I need to lock this down. It needs to be secure. It needs to be compliant. It needs to be fast and reliable. And these are legitimate
Of course.
requirements, but of course, that's the tension. And so then
Right.
you got Kubernetes and more importantly, a shit ton of Kubernetes vendors saying, I will help you lock this down. And then boom, you're back to, oh, well, you can't just access the Kubernetes cluster. You got to fill a triplicate form to install the Helm chart, basically. So that's okay, now MCP. I feel like MCP is doing this in fast forward. Like the first phase, containers is an area of freedom and innovation and rapid iteration for developers. That was like a couple of years. I feel like we're already done with that phase. Like it's going to be a few months with MCP, and already I'm seeing everyone promising to lock that shit down. Because, hey, MCP isn't secure. You saw those, right? MCP isn't secure. Here's all the ways you can get hacked with MCP. Tool proliferation. Like if the LLM has too many MCP tools, it starts not performing as well, which is true.
No observability.
The access, So there's all these legitimate reasons that MCP absolutely should be locked down. Now what's happening is everyone's rushing to the gatekeeping phase because there's so much money to be made with MCP as infrastructure. Every IDE and agent, and also because of how it works, there's so many opportunities to gatekeep. So VS Code, Cloud Code, whatever, all of those, the agents are all going to insert an auto MCP selector. So now the new bleeding edge is you don't just get the tools you installed because there's too many. You get whatever the built-in gatekeeper decided are relevant tools for the task at hand. So that's one gatekeeper. And then you've got a gatekeeper at the LLM level, like the LLM endpoint, the API that you were talking to.
Right.
It can inject tools. That's what OpenAI does, what Anthropic does. It can decide which tools to inject. There are a million companies selling LLM proxies now. So we're going to see proxies being gatekeepers to what tools are actually allowed or not, with all sorts of fancy stuff that IT will just eat up. They will love it, And so I think MCP is going to it's going to thrive as an infrastructure layer, and it's going to die a very rapid death as a layer of developer innovation and iteration. Devs are not going to be able to actually install and use an MCP server because it's useful. It's just not, it's going to get locked down too quickly.
Yeah.
So I think devs will just kind of migrate up and look for escape hatches. And I'll tell you one escape hatch: containers. Because if you install container use as an MCP server, and IT will approve it because it's actually useful. It solves this big, important problem. Then guess what? You can have the agent install whatever it needs in containers in these environments. So it's literally the same exact thing. Instead of containers being the escape hatch for developers to escape locked down VMs, it's going to be containers as the escape hatch for locked down MCPs. That's my prediction.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. I mean, I love it because I'm sitting here nodding my head, going, "This is exactly like we have done this 1,000 times." Yeah. It happened in the '90s with Windows 3.1 with me working in the military. It's happened with VMs. We expanded, we contracted, we expanded, we contracted, and I completely, like Nirmal and I saw at KubeCon all these AI proxies or AI gateways or. We just had a show about it a week and a day ago with Solo, and talking about specifically MCP for the audio listeners. I brought up on the screen an article that just came out a couple of days ago from this is the AI Native Dev website, ainativedev.io, and they have an article called "The Dark Side of Just Hooking Up AI Agents to GitHub." So I'm right now recording a GitHub Actions course, and very early on, about a month and a half ago, I realized that there was going to be a lot of stuff about AI in it because more than just like I'm going to use an AI to write the YAML for Kubernetes or whatever, right? I was going to have more stuff about AI automation, MCP servers for GitHub, because I felt like if I launched a course this summer and it didn't have all that, it would, it's like a 3-year-old course at that point, but the minute I launch it. So I'm doing the work to write this course, and this article comes out, and I walk through the step-by-step of, oh yeah, this is going to be a big problem, and there's no easy way for them to fix it. Yep. Because if I'm using an IDE, like I've been playing a lot this week with VS Code, I've been using Coder all year, and I dabbled in Windsurf for a while. So I've been trying all the different things, and in VS Code, it basically has access to all my GitHub. Right? It has access to everything I have in GitHub. And they describe in this article how all someone has to do is put in a public rogue issue inside of one of my repos. And if I ask my LLM to pick it up and check it out to see if it should do some work, that issue can be written to cause my LLM to go pull secrets and information from one of my private repos and then report it back to the, and when you read through it, you realize this is such an easy exploit, and because of the way we send text to LLMs in one giant blob, there is no, that I'm aware of, current defense against this.
Right. So the main,
I know you all haven't read it, but I just thought this was wonderfully horrible.
Yeah.
So I think
and how it could.
I've been looking at a lot of these security parts of the MCP universe, and one thing that comes up a lot in that discussion is one of the main issues, and it might be intractable, is that there's no differentiation between the control plane, the message channel, and the the data channel, right? It's all.
That's what they specifically call out in here. That's a great way to say it. It's a great way to say it.
Solomon, I think what's your and Dagger's take on that? Is that another piece of this container use, is to kind of create that isolation just so that the blast radius of all these issues, but that doesn't necessarily solve, those agents in container use can still just go out and leak information from anything else that it's accessing.
Yeah.
So what's your take on all that? Or is that kind of unknown still?
So there's 2 layers to it. And container use by design is very constrained in its scope, right? It's not trying to solve everything for everyone. Is trying to solve one specific problem for one specific audience. The problem of a coding agent not having a repeatable, safe environment to develop in, and the audience is developers trying to use a coding agent efficiently. That's what container use solves. And it plugs into the ecosystem that we have, which has all these problems that you describe. It doesn't solve them, but it can, I guess, it gives you a building block for containing literally the problem. So at least you have a Lego brick they can reason about. I think part of the problem, the reason these problems seem intractable is that we have these huge complicated systems that are grafted onto other huge complicated systems. Like GitHub Actions itself and other CI systems are the same, but GitHub Actions is so huge and popular. It is fundamentally insecure. There's like a million ways to get hacked through GitHub Actions. You can't really solve it because it's too big and bloated and complicated. There's like, it's basically hopeless. So the best you can do is patch your way around, add stupid constraints like, oh, you can't, like an open source repo, when you set up your CI in GitHub Actions, by default, the secure way to do it is that if a third, someone you don't know, opens a pull request on your open source project, and that trigger is running various CI workflows, those workflows do not have access to secrets, just in case you got hacked. Anyway, there's lots of reasons why that is a valuable attack vector, but that's a mitigation. But that attack vector should not exist in the first place. So you're adding another layer of agentic coding on top of that. So you're just keeping all the existing problems and you're adding a new pile of problems. So our approach is, okay, let's break this down into manageable small problems, and then we can reason about the system. So it's the Lego approach.
Yeah.
The other layer, which is at the Dagger level, we build a whole system layer for application delivery platforms. So for assembling workflows to build and test and ship software. So that's for platform engineers. It's not for application developers. Application developers typically, they use Dagger indirectly, right? They use a Dagger-built system created for them by their platform team. In there, we try to give platform engineers, same thing, the building blocks to solve these problems from first principles reliably. So in the case of agents, our approach is to tell platform engineers, agents are not some mystical black box that you got to buy all in one, or go and get a PhD in machine learning to even hope to build. It's just a few more system primitives that then you combine with all the other system primitives you already know. And this is a very manageable design for you to understand. In fact, it's your responsibility to understand it, because my strong belief is, in the end, most agents that software engineers interact with will be custom-made, specialized agents assembled and delivered by their platform team. So it's literally the platform team's job to assemble agents and give them to their teams of developers to use.
And then it's also that agent platform team to monitor them,
of course, run them, monitor them. Yeah, totally. So you can't, you cannot do that with a giant black box you don't understand, right? So what we're doing at the system layer is just breaking up these mystical black boxes into small manageable components, right? And I think our contribution for the platform engineering community is to clearly explain that to understand agents, first you have to understand workflows. And there's a very clear and simple relationship between workflows and agents. A workflow is a deterministic set of steps that are executed in regular software. Agents, that's an LLM deciding to call software when it wants, how it wants, in a loop. It's by definition not deterministic, right?
Right.
Those two, it's like yin and yang. They're complementary. But what everyone does when you say, oh, I'm using an agent, really what you're using is a combination of workflow and agents. There's no agent out there that's pure, just an LLM doing random things. It's always wrapped in a workflow. And sometimes that workflow itself is managed by an agent, which itself is wrapped in another workflow. So if you understand the basics, the fundamentals of what a workflow is and what an agent is, then you can combine them.
Yeah, it's almost like you have two colors. You have the area that is deterministic, and then I can imagine like DoD the defining non-deterministic workflows. Kind of like we had Sipper and Nipper net. We had an insecure network, we had a secure network, and there were different rules for each. Mm-hmm. And I can see scenarios of like the minute you allow it to make decisions on its own and act with a tool, that classifies it as non-deterministic. And then there's, in an enterprise, there's suddenly a whole new set of rules. It has to run in a container. There can't be any secrets in it. The output has to be reviewed before it's committed or executed somewhere else. Yeah. And right, you're right. Like right now, it's all very nebulous and it's very black boxy because we're all downloading, these wonderful tools, Cursor and Windsurf and stuff, and they are doing all of the agent stuff themselves. They are deciding. I mean, to me, those tools are like a human. The workflow is a human workflow. It spits out, hey, is it okay for me to run this Golang command in your directory on your computer? And I just have to click yes every time, and it's like, I feel like I'm the hamster. I'm just eating the little treat every time.
The relationship to these big AI companies, between the big AI companies and like the traditional software industry and specifically platform teams, platform engineering, since that's the community I'm focused on. It's kind of like, it's going to be a very weird analogy. Maybe it doesn't work, but in Star Wars, when they're in the forests and the Ewoks capture they capture the heroes, and they're, for a little while they're prisoners, right? And they're making a fire. It looks like maybe they're going to eat them, and then they use a trick with the Force and they make the shiny robot, like, what's his name? Oh, so embarrassing. 3PO.
C-3PO.
They make him fly, and then the Ewoks are like,
he hovers,
and they think it's a god, and then they basically, from there, they just kind of have them do whatever they want. So, like the flying trick, that's the LLM, basically, like actual genuine magic. But then after that, you're using that aura to get away with everything else. And so that's the AI labs. Like they got the model that can do crazy things, and then they're like, remember, I'm a god, so now I'm going to sell you VMs. Oh my God, they're agentic VMs. Okay, now I'm going to sell you a build tool. Oh my God, it's an agentic magic build tool. There's no way I could possibly build this. So this is, at some point you cross the line into just building regular software, maybe really well, maybe poorly, but you're competing with everyone else in the software market, and you're using the aura of being the inventors of the big magic AI to compete in the market the old-fashioned way. This reminds me also of AWS in the early days. Remember that aura before AWS turned out to be a huge, super successful, but business, but still a business that you can compete with and has strengths and weaknesses like everyone else, right?
Right.
Before that, remember, there was this moment where it was like, AWS is like, what's the point? What's the point? You would have entire sectors of the tech industry where AWS had no product, but the analysts would say, well, clearly AWS, it's only a matter of time before AWS just launches something and takes this over. So what's the point? There was that moment where that's how everyone felt, right? So I think this is the same thing. So my message to platform engineers is just to be pragmatic about this and not be the Ewoks in that analogy, and realize, okay, this is magic. I'm going to use it, but we'll take it from here. Basically, just build platforms with it, incorporate it, embed it. It's okay. Like you can actually, you can build your own platform using these building blocks that these really cool AI labs built. You don't have to buy everything they build out of a sense that you have no choice, basically. Yeah.
Another really small analogy would be early days when you're running Docker, like just Docker build or Docker run, and it would pick the main image from Docker Hub, right? Like if you just do Docker run busybox, you didn't really check what was that busybox image, right? It just pulled down the image and then you just ran it. And then over time, it kind of, oh, wait a second, we need to understand and be pragmatic about this. So we're going to have our own platform team build a base image. So MCP is kind of going through that same phase, and the magic, it doesn't change, right? Like the Docker magic didn't change. It's just, hey, let's make sure we ground this back into something that we can reason about, like you said, and have some visibility and control over.
Yeah. Only this time it's going faster because the advantages and the risks aren't inherently limited by your existing infrastructure, right? Like we talk about going around IT, right? Shadow IT. I mean, I could see how, OpenAI's API is shadow IT. basically, if you do it right. And you run your MCPs locally, you run your agent locally, and because what developers have, they have all the API keys, right? They have the access key to the database. They usually can get it, right? Because they're writing this stuff. They have to have local stuff. They probably have production keys somewhere. If they're super secure, there might need to be one other developer that approves them getting the key or whatever. But they have access to the information, the data, and maybe they don't have access to spin up their own VMs in their infrastructure, so they can't cause infrastructure growth or whatever like Docker could. But at the same time, if I want an MCP to help me clean up that database, I don't need an infrastructure person to ask me that anymore, right? I can have an LLM scan that million row table or billion row table.
On the infrastructure side, I mean, a major issue that almost every engineering team is dealing with or will deal with soon is token costs. I mean, the budgeting of that is infrastructure spend. So it's not the same as what containers did, but that's a major issue right now. Well, what happens if you just let a gazillion agents run and you're not monitoring, you're not efficient about it? The question of caps and rate limits, just that alone is huge, because it's otherwise it's just you can literally spend all your money on agents.
Yeah.
And the whole design is encouraging us to give it more tokens. Like the more data you feed it, the more like it's detrimental to any of your workflows or any of your LLM calling if you're trying to conserve on tokens.
That's another issue I have with trusting literally your whole platform end to end, the software tooling, the life cycle, the compute, the storage, the secrets, all of it to a company that makes more money when you spend more tokens. That there's an issue there where they're just not, they can be principled, they can balance it out with just trying to be honest, but at the end of the day, especially when things get really competitive, someone's not getting their bonus if they don't get you to spend more tokens. And eventually, in a market that's competitive enough, that wins over everything else. It's only a matter of time. So the predictable result is waste. And the same thing happened when you trusted your whole architecture with companies that made more money if you spend more CPU or storage meters. It's very predictable. You need a balance. I think the best balance we have is the system layer, right? You need some sort of equivalent of the operating system that is open. Like you need open source at that layer. That's where you insert portability and a sound design that is not completely baked into this black box that you're paying for, right? That's where you get balance. Of course, you need those, you need these proprietary offerings. But you just also need a platform that you can design and you're in control of, and then you plug these proprietary components into, right? So that's what's missing right now.
I don't think I realized until this conversation how I feel like we just kind of were wrapping up this 10-year cycle of maybe not so much Docker, the tool itself, but at least on the Kubernetes side, if I could draw an analogy between how Kubernetes came into the world and how the market sort of like dollar signs of every software company of how they could integrate with Kubernetes and convince you to you need them if you're going to do Kubernetes, right? Every infrastructure company, every security company, every CI company, they all were like, oh yeah, we got to get on this wave because if we can do something with Kubernetes, we can embed ourselves in your infrastructure, and we know those life cycles are forever. So they have like guaranteed income. And I'm now just realizing that as excited as I am about MCP, and I'm also equally as concerned about the security of it, I can imagine that now every single security company is going to end up having like MCP proxies that filter for secrets on the way into the LLM and making sure there's no corporate data on its way in, or that you're not leaking things. Because our fundamental challenge is we just spent the last 15 years building SaaSes and learning the hard lessons of running untrusted code, like whether it's code in a PR in a public repo, or it's, pulling, copy and pasting from Stack Overflow, however you got the code. But now with LLMs and MCP, it's text. Like we're not just defending against code now. We're defending against any untrusted text that will somehow sneak into the context window. And I don't think until I started to see some of these reports and examples of how easy it is to really just make your LLM do rogue, crazy stuff, how easy it is to sneak stuff in there. Like one-line commit on some instruction file marked down in a Git repo somewhere, and suddenly the LLM is now trying to delete databases, right?
Yeah.
Because you've convinced it to.
So I saw a joke about that. I was like, oh, now we have SQL injection as like a required service for development, right?
Right.
And like that becomes
I don't even have to know SQL anymore. I don't have to be a good injector.
Right. It's like that same surface area problem, but actually not the same. It's even larger to reason about.
Yeah,
It's
it
wild.
feels like every single company, again, every Kubernetes company, every other software company is now going to have a whole new product line of MCP tooling or, LLM wrapping tooling or whatever.
If I may try one more analogy, I think it's still unclear if the MCP ecosystem will turn out to be the next Kubernetes ecosystem or the next OpenStack ecosystem.
Yeah. But what about the pattern? But so remove like the implementation, but what about these patterns, right?
Oh yeah, I don't have any criticism of the implementation or the design. It is what it is, it serves a purpose clearly. Like there was a need for something and MCP was there and people latched on. That's how every winning ecosystem starts, It's good enough for what mattered, and then it'll get better. So my questions are around the ecosystem that's forming around it, the incentives for adopting it, how it'll be adopted in practice versus what the spec allows for, two different things, right? And especially the rush of vendors to make money from it on the infrastructure side, for locking it down. Like what choked the OpenStack ecosystem was the imbalance between vendors and actual usage.
Yeah.
Like the offer just outweighed the demand. Right now, hype is not the same thing as demand. No one knows really how much MCP really is being used. And how it's being talked about. I know there are people using it in very highly visible ways, but that's not the same as actual usage. And the main difference between the Kubernetes and OpenStack ecosystems was actual usage, So
yeah, and Kubernetes was used even when it was very rough. So like people were finding value out of it, like almost right away.
Yeah. I think that's I think MCP is useful. So I'm legitimately wondering which way it will go because it has some characteristics of Kubernetes, like I think more on the useful side, and people using it in spite of it being rough. That seems very authentic. It's not like it's made up usage. It's just that I think it's too early to draw conclusions, and I'm personally worried by this rush of infrastructure vendors just rushing to extract value from it before there's that much value built up to extract. It's possible to kill the value of an ecosystem by trying to extract too much too quickly, if that makes sense.
There's another side to this, which is the speed at which all these vendors are building MCP servers for their services is quite incredible. Like, let's assume the demand is not there. Then all of a sudden, all of these vendors spinning up MCP servers wrapped, in front of their APIs to just catch this demand is pretty incredible. And I don't, the nice part is it's like doesn't take that much effort to put an MCP server together. Yeah. So maybe that's like a red herring in this situation, but that was just really interesting. And like from where I'm sitting, I'm seeing a lot of demand for understanding, maybe not implementation yet, but definitely an understanding of what these architectures are, how to use them, what they are, how to run them. Kind of in the same vein as like, what's a container? How do I run them?
Yeah.
Before actually adopting them, right? If you're mentoring some software devs or newly minted IT folk, what would you tell them? What kind of advice would you give them in this new paradigm?
Would it be a developer or
let's say a developer? Okay. Yeah, let's say a developer.
Well, I mean, to some extent, my feeling is in periods of very rapid change in the stack. I mean, there's always change, but this is more rapid, more change, more rapidly than usual, right? I feel like it's a good time to focus on the fundamentals. Like if you're a developer, you should be focusing on shipping something every day, like shipping something valuable every day. Don't worry too much about what tools you use to ship it with, what technologies. Just prioritize shipping something of value, in any setting, professionally, at home, as a student. Shipping always wins. And then curiosity, learning, experimenting, it's a competitive world out there, and even more so. So, you're going to need those fundamentals. I think really that's what matters most. It's very likely that following those fundamentals will lead you towards something has to do with AI agents, because that's where a lot of the new valuable things are being built, But I think starting from first principles is important, because it will also avoid falling into traps like checking the box. Okay, gotta check the AI box. Let me pick a certification to get or whatever. Okay, I checked the box. Moving on. That's on paper. Now you've done AI, but it's superficial, right? What matters is that you're internally driven to build something valuable every day and learn every day. That's how you succeed, I think.
I really like that attitude. And I've also found personally that these AI tools help a lot with learning. They've helped me accelerate my ability to learn and to research. And I find myself recommending folks who are new or just trying to put their toe into there, not go like all the way to like just having these systems architecting applications and going YOLOing, vibe coding and all that, but to start using them as assistants in doing research and learning and enabling curiosity. That in the longer run will be much more valuable for us as an industry and for us, for each of us. And yeah, I like that attitude, and fundamentals as well, right? Like at the end of the day, there's still network connections and DNS and TCP and TLS and all that kind of stuff somewhere, right? And
there's always a time where knowing just a little bit, knowing the layer below you a little bit better will just help you stand out or just build something better.
Yeah.
I think it sounds obvious when you say it, but still people underestimate how true it is and how compounding it is. Like the earlier you start doing it, the more value you'll get out of it. Like, if you make sure to ship a little something useful every day, at least every week, and just stick to it, after 6 months, it's going to be a major difference.
Yeah.
A year, even more so, etc.
So to the listeners that we have that are coming to our show looking for advice on how to kick the tires on this new paradigm, what would be your advice to them? Obviously, you have container use.
Sorry, I was going to ask a more specific question. If we're talking about container use specifically, it's funny because I have to put it in air quotes. Container use, the tool, not containers in general.
The difference.
It's a great name. It's a fun name. It's a fun name. But if I'm using this tool, the cool thing is on the page you have like, how do you connect this as an MCP tool to a whole bunch of different agents? There's Claude Code, there's Amazon Q, there's Goose, which I've heard of but not played with, Cursor, VS Code / Copilot, Kilo Code. Do you have one you're excited about or playing with, or that you would encourage people to check out? I mean, these are all sort of different agents at editing. All their goals are to edit code locally on your system, right?
Yeah, if you're a developer, there are two things. If you're a developer, the first thing to do is whatever tool, whatever IDE you're already familiar with, if they have an agent feature built in, strongly recommend using that, whatever your IDE or tool choice is, because it's the easiest first step. Just start from a tool you're familiar with and like go check that box. Pretty likely that the box exists. And in my opinion, there may be a temporary advantage on the agentic feature of this or that IDE, but it is temporary. They're all copying each other super fast. So I think in the end, familiarity and, the human side of the relationship, UX, whatever, brand loyalty will matter a lot. So if you use VS Code, honestly, I would just let VS Code's adding the agent features really quickly, etc. As a second step, I personally really like the command line coding agent idea. So that, to me, that's the next logical step. And it's very competitive also. I think at the moment, Cloud Code is in the lead, but it's not open source. It's not multi-model. I think it's important to play with it just to see what the current reference implementation is of that pattern.
And when you're using Cloud Code,
I don't use it. Sorry. I have used it in order to be familiar with it, but I don't use it in my day-to-day workflow, for example.
I'm just curious how like giving these different agents access to this container use tool. I'm curious for someone to like sort of go through them all and go, yeah, this one behaves and actually tries to use containers to run all the code, but this other one is like misbehaving and constant, like Nirmal's like scenario of like constantly wanting to do its own thing.
Yeah, what's interesting is that's more of a model issue. So all these agents at the end of the day are software wrappers around the model, right? So
they probably have a system prompt, right?
They have a system prompt, they have built-in tools. Yeah, they have tools and a prompt basically. And it's the tools are injected. If it's an IDE, there's some sort of integration on the front end so that when the model calls its tool to edit a file, that's built, that will prompt there'll be a pop-up or something in your UI saying, hey, do you want to approve this change? That kind of integration. So that's where these agents differentiate. But when it comes to, I'm telling it to use a container and it won't, or, if I do this, it does, that's 90%, 99%, it's the model behind the scenes, So in other words,
I feel like
most agents are equal or will soon be equal in how well they integrate container use.
I feel like the scenario for me is going to end up sounding very similar to the way I have arguments with Siri. Like, no, not that album,
yes.
This album.
Yeah.
No. But not the weather.
But that's kind of part of the plan with container use. Like right now, these agents are too monolithic, right? Like you, for example, we just talked about the agent, making a decision to use a tool or not, but it's the model making the decision. And so the agent is, like a bunch of tools attached to the model. So one thing we're trying to do is show that it's possible to decouple the model from its environment. And one thing we would really like to see happen is in a team, you're creating and managing these environments with container use, which is Dagger under the hood. So it's open source, open everything. And then you give it to your Cloud Code and it's working inside the environment. And then for whatever reason, you want to take that environment and all the work that's been done in it so far, all the context that's been attached to it, files, container configuration, documentation, history, and then you take it and then you give it to another agent to work in, right? Maybe because you're migrating, or maybe because you're collaborating with another team and your colleagues are using another agent. So then what? You're using Cloud Code, they're using the OpenAI Codex thing. If you're using the built-in features, there's basically no portability between them.
Overlap, yeah.
You can't say, hey, I did this, do you want to take over? Or, let me try a variation of your thing, So it's an obvious opportunity for interrupt and decoupling. One thing we're adding to this project, container use, is we're expanding gradually the scope of what context you can attach to it, to the environment. Like, for example, Cloud Code, again, at the moment, I think the best implementation of the command line coding agent, but too proprietary for my taste. They have a built-in tool for managing tasks. So that when you just prompt and you say, please develop this feature, the first thing Cloud Code will do, the model is influenced to create tasks for itself. So, and it's very basic. It's like literally a little CRUD interaction. Like there's probably a tool called new task and one called list tasks, whatever. It's just organizing a little bit of text, but it makes a difference because the model is making a plan for itself and then it's executing its own plan, right? So that's a very clever bit of agent engineering that at the moment is completely proprietary and completely coupled to this one agent. But what if your container use environment, completely open source, not tied to one agent, had a new data field attached to it, which is the tasks currently attached to this environment. And then you connect it, the same model, the same agent now attaches the tasks to the environment. And then you say, thank you. And you go and you give it to OpenAI Codex. And guess what? Codex sees tasks on the environment because it's portable. It says, these are the tasks that have been defined by my predecessor in this environment. oh, it looks like these are done. This is the next one. Let me go and do it. So these things can be made portable. They're not what I was saying about the aura, right? There is scope creep right now from these AI companies, and they're using the aura. I mean, it's not some nefarious scheme. It's just natural. Like, why would they not do it? So what I'm trying to communicate to the software community is 90% of this stuff is software that you already know how to architect and improve, and your instincts on what should be tightly coupled, what should be decoupled, what should be open, what should be closed, the trade-offs, like all these instincts that you have as a software engineer are still valid. So let's apply them,
Yeah.
Right.
What's interesting is you were just mentioning like the task, right? Just think about it, like what you were talking about, like attaching the task context. And if you were to even abstract it a little bit more, maybe even the whole entire workflow context can just, like the workflow itself can be passed along, and the tasks in that instance of that workflow.
Well, we could technically do that today if you choose the right IDE. You can't give it to someone else that I'm aware of, but you can switch models, right, on the tools that let you switch model. So the idea that like if you can switch models, why can't you package this up and switch people? There's probably already an open source tool that allows me to package up context if I'm using a particular open source tool or something, and pass it to someone else, or put it in the repo itself, or in some sort of download.
So I was just going to mention that I've been testing two different ways of doing this exact thing. One is this massive system prompt called Memory Bank that comes from Klein, that is just prompts that set up a system of markdown files that the agent uses as like its repository of context and status within a workspace. And another one called sequential thinking, which is an MCP that does that. Like then the agent chooses to interact with that MCP service every once in a while to manage tasks. And so already in a couple of weeks, I've already seen at least 2 or 3 implementations of this concept in very dramatically different ways, but kind of the same outcome. And what you're talking about is like a third way of doing it, which is adding portability, right? Like right now I've been using a system that adds that context as part of the project itself, right? There's like a memory bank folder with a bunch of markdown files. And then if you're spinning up a new task or restarting something, it has to go read those files and then load it into the context. So I'm imagining that's like something that here's another one.
Yeah, I just learned about Taskmaster this week, which is not a new project. It's been around quite some time. Victor Farsick just put up a great video on it. So it sounds very similar to what you're talking about.
I think the big blind spot in all of these tools, and the one that we're trying to fill, is that all these things, ultimately, they're all built on the LLM context, which is basically a history of messages, right? And then you can connect tools over MCP to save them for later, or, summarize them, structure them, whatever. But at the end of the day, those are messages. In the context of an agent that does pure thinking and talking, that's fine, because then that's the whole sandbox, the messages. But if it's a coding agent, that's along the way, it's running commands, it's editing files, it's interacting with the environment, and these tools don't know about the rest of the environment. So for example, some of these agents that have a really cool rewind feature or like branching feature. Oh, let me go back and let me branch off from this point, because it messed up. In a coding agent, what you're doing is you're rewinding. So, I ran npm this, I ran npm that, I ran apt-get irm.fr this. Oh no, I messed up. Let me rewind. So now it has no memory. You rewinded its memory of what it did, but you didn't actually rewind the effect of what it did. And that actually makes things worse. So that's actually a huge problem, where it installs the wrong version of the library. And they're like, oh, there's a rewind feature. And now not only is the wrong version still there, but it forgot that it installed it in the first place, and it will never go and check. So what we're trying to do is attach the whole environment to the context, so you can actually manipulate it in the same way that you manipulate the history of the LLM. And existing DevOps tools cannot do that, because they don't have the foundation of treating these containers and files and all these objects in the environment as immutable objects that you can transform in a DAG, the way you can transform the LLM state, but Dagger works that way. So that's basically our trick. We're using Dagger to let the agent instrument its environment in the same way it already instruments its history of messages. And like you said, there's a million tools to interact with the history, but no tools at all, no ecosystem at all to interact with the environment. It's just missing completely. So we're hoping to unlock that.
That's very interesting. I've been running into those issues the last few weeks, and I know containers, and so I'm using containers,
right?
But I'm having to build what you're talking about myself.
Exactly. That's where everyone's stuck at, and you're not alone. Well, congratulations, you're at the bleeding edge.
And it's been very frustrating. Yeah. It's been super frustrating, especially because it's like, why don't you know? Like, I feel like yelling at the LLM, like the agent, like, why aren't you as smart about containers as I am about containers? Like, all this other stuff.
I think right now you got some very smart companies building solutions that they're going to bake in their proprietary all-in-one product.
Interesting.
And like PaaS, like containers existed before Docker. They were mostly locked in proprietary platforms. And so a bunch of people could claim that they had solved it, but they had solved it in a silo. So was it really solved? Some problems aren't really solved until they're solved, in a ubiquitous open way, basically. And this is one of those problems, because otherwise there's no ecosystem.
All right. I'm going to have to go watch this keynote now.
Yeah. I will be installing this after this show, for sure. Not having read container use, is it easy for someone to run this as a pod in a Kubernetes cluster? Okay, so I'm just like thinking about scaling, right? Like if you have hundreds of developers, hundreds of all these things running all over the place, isolated environments, from a platform infrastructure perspective, obviously it seems like, Kubernetes would be a great fit but from a Kubernetes perspective, this is just another container, and these are all just other containers, like applications just running, doing tons of LLM API calls.
Yeah.
But what's your view on that?
It's all running in Dagger. Dagger runs at scale in very large deployments already, and we piggyback on that 100%. So you can run Dagger on a Kubernetes cluster or on the infrastructure of your choice. It works. You can have a bunch of remote Dagger engines. When I gave my keynote, I did a live demo, which a lot of people advise me not to do because, LLMs, untested software. I did it. So it was on my laptop, but all the containers were actually running on a home server in my basement, actually right next door, over tail scale, and it was like a pretty vanilla remote Dagger setup. So the nice thing is it's a wrapper for Dagger. So you don't have to be a Dagger expert to use this, to use container use. But the whole point of building it on Dagger, and our main advantage, is that should you need customization of the environment or the infrastructure running it, we got like literally years of R&D that have gone into that. And we have a whole community of platform engineers that have been stress testing it at scale already. So we're going to bring all of that to bear. Everything from Kubernetes deployments to caching to secrets management to like OTel tracing. All of it is OTel traced out of the box. So we got so many goodies in there that we will that hopefully people will get far along enough in using the tool that they will start caring about it. But the question you asked, literally right after the keynote, someone came to our booth and asked exactly the same question. Like, how do I love that my devs can run this on a laptop. What if I want them to get a nice scalable cloud backend for all these containers?
Right.
And so that's the answer.
Cool.
Awesome.
Just even this conversation, we have to remind ourselves how bleeding edge this stuff is. Like every day there's like something new. It's almost impossible to keep up. So I really appreciate you coming on and having like a deep dive discussion into these new patterns. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. And people can find you on Twitter. You're pretty active on Twitter.
I am.
And on your Discord server, which I always thought it was kind of cool that you as a company decided that Discord would be your main communication channel amongst yourselves, not just the one that you put in front of your customers, but you can see all the things happening in real time on the Discord server. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, we made a decision very early on to bet the farm on community. Take an aspect of what we did at Docker that I always loved and try to amp it up even more. And so, yeah, like you said, we have a community Discord, and then we have a team Discord, and they're actually the same Discord. So the whole team is there all the time. It's our office. We're a distributed team. It has a very special vibe to it. Our community is very engaged, very passionate. A lot of systems engineers, platform engineers, people who deploy Dagger at very large scale and come tell us about it. And right next to, 2 people, startups and students and researchers. So it's a fun place to be if you care about systems and application delivery and the future of DevOps and things like that.
I like being in there and seeing in one channel 2 people talking about a particular Dagger demo, and then I jump to another channel and there's 2 Dagger engineers talking about the next deployment they're shipping, the next version of Dagger that's going up. And even in the CNCF and in Kubernetes Slacks, you don't see that level of sort of transparency and sort of day-to-day in the weeds sort of stuff happening. So I thought that was a cool,
thank you,
a cool choice for you all in terms of culture.
Yeah, this is super exciting stuff. And we could probably have you back every few weeks, and it's like a whole new brave world already.
Thank you both for being here. I'm excited to be part of it.